Hello, everybody. Welcome to History Valley Podcast. Today, I am joined by Dr. Yaakov Yanki Teppler. Yaakov Yanki Teppler has a bachelor's in history and education, his master's in history, and his PhD in 2004. He got his PhD in 2004 at the University of Tel Aviv, and is head of the history department at Beit Berl College in Israel. And today, we're going to be talking about his book called Birkat haMinim, Jews and Christians in Conflict in the Ancient World. Welcome to the podcast, Doctor.
Thank you.
Great. So tell us, what was it like in the ancient world when, during the first few centuries of Christianity between Jews and Christians? What was the relationship like? Was it tense? Was it cordial, or was it a bit of both?
Well, the problem is that as far as we go back to the beginnings of Christianity, it's more problematic to understand what was going on in that time. When I say the far we can go, is first of all to decide when exactly was the beginning of Christianity. Was it at the time of Jesus himself? I don't think so. Was it later? Was it Paul that created Christianity? The only thing that we can say is that Christianity, or the belief in Jesus as not as a Messiah, not in the beginning. He wasn't considered as a son of God in the first, let's say, 20, 30 years of of this phenomena. In the beginning, it was, the first Christians were Jews. So it was a Jewish matter. I don't say problem, but it was a Jewish matter inside. In the first century, because before the rebellion against the Romans, which started in 66 until the year 70, and the destruction of the Second Temple in Jerusalem, there were many people in that time who presented themselves as messiahs, as leaders, as those who were chosen by God to lead the people. And all of them are Josephus Flavius, the Jewish historian who lived in the first century. He is telling us about them, about those false messiahs, because he has a purpose. His purpose is to serve the Roman the Roman policy in Israel, because Josephus Flavius defected to the Romans. He was one of the commanders of the big rebellion, big revolt against the Romans. But he defected to the Romans in the year 68 or 69. So when he talks about messiahs, but when he talks about prophets or charismatic leaders, his purpose is to show that the Jews were led by false leaders to their astray, to destruction. Jesus was probably just one of them. The difference is that he was, or the movements that was, I don't say that he created, but the movement that was created after Jesus, in the time of Paul, in the time of Peter, we don't know exactly, was very successful. The question is why. But my opinion, my view is that when we talk about the relationship between the first Christians and the Jewish, let's say, mainstream Judaism, at that time, we have to understand that there is a third party, the Romans. And when I analyze the relationship between the rabbinical Jews, let's call them rabbinical Jews, mainstream Judaism, and Christian Jews, those Jews who believe that Jesus was the Son of God or something like that, the Romans were always in the background. We tend to forget that. And it became more and more, as Josephus presented the other messiahs, it became more and more a problem for the Jews, for the rabbinical Judaism, in their relationship with the Romans. Messianism was forbidden in any kind, in any sort, in any form. It was forbidden because Messianism is the meaning of this, as Josephus put it himself, is a disturbance to the stability of the Roman Empire, and as a result, to the stability and to the acknowledgement of the Romans in the Jewish authority or the Jewish authorities that the Jews tried to establish after the Great Revolt.
In scholarship, there's a huge debate if Jesus is mentioned in the Talmud at all, and the scholars that do believe that the biblical Jesus, the New Testament Jesus, is mentioned in the Talmud, think that the Talmud is referring to the biblical Jesus in a negative way. What do you make of that?
Well, first of all, we have to consider the difficulties of the Talmud, the Jerusalem and the Babylonian Talmud as historical sources. It wasn't meant at all to be a historical source. It's not just Josephus Flavius or other Hellenistic writings of historians. The Talmud, which is based on the Mishnah, is a huge literature, and this literature is meant to be just a collection of rulings about the day-to-day life, of Judaism. And if the Talmud, when the Talmud brings about some memories of history, of the Hasmoneans, for example, of Jesus is another examples, of the Great Revolt and things like that, it's only to use them as to use these stories as assistance to the rulings. That's it. So they don't have to be, to like in modern time historians, they don't have to be committed to history. So when they bring something which is also, but when they mention Jesus, they don't know exactly when Jesus lived. They didn't have the they didn't read the New Testament. I don't believe that they did. They had some memories. They heard some rumors about the Jesus phenomenon. I mean, about the Jesus phenomenon, but in the beginning of the first century. But they didn't know exactly what was going on, of course. So if they mention in many times, it's not just. I think that Jesus is mentioned in the Talmud maybe 5 times, about 5 times, not more than that. But early Christianity is mentioned many times in many places in the Talmud, in the Mishnah and in the Talmud, in Tosefta and other genres of literature of that time. We have also to remember that the Talmudic literature was written, collected, arranged, edited in hundreds of years, from the 2nd century to the 6th or to the 7th century, like 600 years. It's a very long time. So many redactions, so many additions. So this is about Jesus. And of course, the information is anachronistic. In one source, it is mentioned that Jesus lived in the time of the sage, the rabbi Shimon ben Shattach. Shimon ben Shattach lived in 50 or no more, like 60 or 70 years before Jesus. So of course it's anachronistic. It's not a real, the good source to try to understand the Jewish attitude toward Jesus. The only thing that we know that they say in that particular source that he was hanged. He was hanged. Why he was hanged? Because he smuggled some witchcraft or something, some practice of witchcraft from Egypt to Palestine, because he was a magician, and magician in that source wasn't it was a very negative description of a person. It was a magician. So this is just about Jesus, but about early Christianity, there are many, many more resources in the Talmud, in the Mishnah, where early Christians, the Jews who believed in Jesus, were called minim. This is the Birkat haMinim is talking about them. It's a curse against those minim. Minim is in the plural. The singular is min. Min in English means kind or sort of something. So we don't know. There are many scholars try to interpret this definition, but we don't really know what was the meaning of the term min or minim. But there are three. We have to bear in mind that there are at least 300 places. It's a lot in the Talmud or in the Talmudic literature, where the minim are mentioned. So my research is about those minim, or about the Birkat haMinim, which was, as I just said, it was a curse against the minim. Now this curse was it was a part of the Birkat haMinim is the 12th benediction of the first public prayer of the Jews, which was established, which was fixed at the beginning of the 2nd century CE. And this was the 12th benediction. For the minim, let there be no hope, and the kingdom of arrogance shall be destroyed and perished, and something like that. There are many versions. And I think that, first of all, we know that the meaning of Birkat haMinim, which was recited in the synagogue, as I said, in the first Jewish public prayer, in the beginning of the 2nd century, the purpose was to drive those Jews who believed in Jesus out of the synagogue, which meant to drive them out or expel them out of the community. Because, as we know, for the American Jewry or the British Jewry, the synagogue sometimes is the heart of the community. It's one of the most important establishments of the Jewish community. And it was like that in ancient time, even before Jesus. The synagogue was even the main administrative establishment of the Jewish community, like anywhere, because there were hundreds of thousands of Jews, like anywhere in the time of the Second Temple, and of course after that, in Rome, in today Turkey, Asia Minor, in North Africa, in the Middle East, in Babylonia, in so many, in Egypt. There were so many. I think there's an estimation of at least between 2 and 3 million Jews in the time of the Second Temple. It's a lot. And Jews used to go to synagogues to be together, to be buried in a Jewish tradition, like today. And that was the only place that Jews who believed in Jesus could be expelled from the synagogue, and as I just said, and from the community. And they were very successful.
So which one of the Jesuses in the Talmud do you think is the one that's mentioned in the biblical Jesus? Is it Jesus ben Stata that you were talking about, or ben Pandira? Which one?
We don't know. Jesus,
Okay.
Jesus, this is one of the opinions that we have about the name Ben Pandira or Ben Pantera, panther, like a panther. Panther is a kind of a leopard, I think. And the name Ben Pantera, and it was a common Pantera was a common Roman name. And it was mentioned after a legend that was spread in the area, that Jesus was a son of a harlot, son of a whore, because the Jews didn't believe that the story of the virgin, that the virgin got pregnant and delivered Jesus. And the Jews used to say that she was a whore, Mary, and he is not the son of God; he's the son of a whore. So they use this this legend with. I think it's a legend with this Pantera to because this way it was kind of a mockery, to against this movement. And that panther, and the story was that Mary had an adultery with this Roman soldier, and that Jesus, as a result, was a bastard. So I don't think that there's really, that it represents a historical fact. And also, we have to remember that this story about Jesus ben Pantera was written like hundreds of years after Jesus' time. So it's just a demonstration of the anachronism of these sources. I don't think, but look, there's I would go to another source in the Talmud. There's a story about one of the most prominent Jewish sages of the time of the Tanaim, the sages of the 2nd century CE. His name was Rabbi Eliezer, the son of Horkenus, Eliezer ben Horkenus. And there is a story in the Talmud that he was put to trial in a court martial, in a Roman court martial, a military court, which is very strange. Why was that? And he was charged of the charge was that he had a conversation with a Christian. That Christian is mentioned by his name. His name is Yaakov. This is our both names, right? Jacob, and he was mentioned as Yaakov, the pupil of Jesus of Nazareth in the Talmud. So it was well known that Jesus was Jesus of Nazareth. This is the same Jesus, of course. And this source is reliable. It's reliable when he mentioned Jesus, and he doesn't mention Jesus directly, but just in the background. This source mentions the Jesus phenomenon, the Jesus movement, the first Christians, and I think that this source is very reliable. We can rely on it. That it's a kind of authentic, because it mentions a struggle between the sages of the 2nd century. As I mentioned before, the sages of the mainstream Judaism, the rabbinical Judaism, to be more precise, and against these first Jewish Christians in the shadow of the Roman rule. The Jews tried to have an authority after the Great Rebellion. First of all, they wanted to survive after the rebellion. And they wanted to survive not only as a nation, but also as a leadership. And they wanted to renew Judaism. They were not able to do that without the Roman permission, especially if they want to have an authority, if they want to be a self-government. To have this privilege from the Romans, they had to remove any kind of a danger, of inside danger within Judaism. So we go again to the Birkat haMinim, the blessing against the curse, the 12th blessing of the Amidah prayer, the curse against Christians, in order to satisfy the Roman authorities. That was the reason. This is my view. Okay, I don't think that there's much support, because it's a new. I think that it's a new, with all modesty, opinion. To see a triangle of relationship: the Jews, Jewish Christianity, and the Roman authority. So if we go back to the story that I just mentioned with Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkanus, standing in court-martial in face of a Roman officer, in the suspicion or the charge that he was, he had conversation with one of the pupils of Jesus, one of prominent members of the Jesus movement. Why would the Romans care about it? Why put in a court for? It's a Jewish matter. No, it's not only a Jewish matter. It's a Roman matter also. And I think that Jewish leadership in that time wanted to be, more, how do you say, more pious than the Pope. This is, I don't know, there's a saying in Hebrew. They wanted to be okay with the Roman authorities. So I hope that I was clear in my description, but as I said, to sum up, almost all the places where Jesus is mentioned is anachronistic, and we cannot rely on these sources. They just reflect the fact that Jesus was a kind of a false Messiah, was an enemy, something like that. And the other places where the minim, the heretics, mentioned, they are more reliable, they are more authentic, and we can I think that we can extract much information about the relationship between Jews and the Jewish Christianity, and even later with the pagan Christianity, from the Talmud.
Do you think that Yeshua ben Pandira could have been based on someone that was executed under King Alexander Jannaeus in the 70s BCE? And what happened was that the authors of the Talmud used this character to rewrote him into being like the New Testament Jesus, in order to criticize the New Testament Jesus by rewriting him.
I don't think that we can follow the origins of this story. I think it's impossible. The story is with Pandira. As I said, even Hellenistic writers, historians, non-Jews, the purpose of their writing of history was not to describe the past in that time. The purpose was to describe the reasons why they live as they live today. I mean, in their time. What was the sources of our reality? And what should be our hopes for the future as a result from our what should be the consequences for our lives to the future as a result from the past? That was the spirit of historians in the time of the. It started, I think, in the 5th or 4th centuries BCE with the first Greek historians. So the Jewish historians were not exceptions. They were kind of the same, like Josephus Flavius. He was quite the same. In his writing, he was like other Roman Hellenistic writers. He used the same methods of writing history or writing prose or something like that. In his case, he had a purpose, and his purpose was to show to the world. It wasn't his writings about the Great Rebellion, the Great Revolt against the Romans where the purpose was not to show the Roman heroism or the Jewish fight against the Romans. It was just one purpose, to show what could happen to anyone, any nation, any tribe who dares to revolt against the Romans. That's it. That was the only purpose of it. So even Josephus, when he tried to write about the time before his life, like the time of the Hasmoneans and things like that, he doesn't have the tools that we have as the modern historians, and he has many mistakes. Not to mention those who wrote or collected these memories in the Talmud. So I wouldn't. There's just one thing in common for everybody, for every Jew, all the sages. From the 2nd to the 4th of the 5th century of Judaism, that they were against Christianity, that they rejected the idea of the messianism of Jesus, and not in many places. We have to bear in mind also just one more thing, that in the 13th, I think the 12th or the 13th century Europe, the Christianity, Catholic Christianity, kind of discovered all those problematic phrases and sayings about Jesus in the Talmud. And the Jews decided to have like a self-censorship. And they took out all these problematic, curses and Jesus, son of Pantera, and all these things. And we went back to these stories only in the 19th century. By the way, not by Jewish scholars, but by German scholars of the end of the 19th century, like those scholars started with the opinions about the Bible, like a secular way of reading the Bible. I don't know the exact term in English for this, like critical reading, which was not, of course, allowed before the 19th or the 18th centuries. So that's it, basically.
So when do you think in the ancient world that they start getting along better?
Along what?
When do you think they started getting along better in the ancient world? The relations between the Jews and Christians. When do you think it started to improve? And that's my final question for this interview.
Well, I think that they started to improve only in the end of the it's very sad, but only in the end of the 19th century, beginning of 20th century. And the last I think, very important step from Christianity was the decision from 1965 by the Pope of the 60s. His name was Paul VI, that he initiated the pact that Judaism is kind of the Jewish religion is the sister of Christianity. They came from the same root. The Jews are not to be blamed for the death of the execution of Jesus, which is contrary to what is mentioned in the Gospel according to Matthew. I think in chapter 24, when the Jews kind of tried to encourage Pilate to execute Jesus, and he said to them, "I don't know what you want from him. I don't think that he had that he's sinful or something. That he's done anything." And they said to him, to Pilate, they said, "Crucify him, crucify him. His blood is on ourselves and on our sons, like forever and ever. Don't worry. It's not your fault. It's our fault. We take the fault upon ourselves." Okay, this sentence like caused us so many troubles for Jews. And the Renaissance between Judaism and Christianity started, as I said, just in the end of the 19th, beginning of 20th century, and especially after the Holocaust in 1965. Because, the Pope, Pius XII, who was in office during the Second World War, he didn't say anything about the Holocaust. He didn't try to stop it. Even when the knowledge about the Auschwitz and Treblinka and the extermination of the Jews was very well known in 1943, 1944. So the Christian Authority, they wanted to fix this historical problems between Christianity and Judaism, and I think they succeeded. But it's very, very late. It's and the history between Judaism and Christianity is very bad during almost 2,000 years. So we are lucky maybe to live today. I don't know.
Well, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you very much for having me.
Of course. And I thank everybody else for participating in the live chat discourse. And I will see all of you later. Thanks again, Doctor.
You're welcome.
Hello, viewers. Thanks for watching this video from the History Valley YouTube channel. Please don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. And if any of you wish to further support this channel, please consider checking out this channel's Patreon page and becoming a patron, and or donate through PayPal or through Super Chat during a live stream. Thank you.